There are people who walk into your life and leave you confused, not because they shouted at you, not because they betrayed you openly, but because they made you question your worth silently. One day they pull you close. The next day they disappear emotionally. One moment they make you feel special. The next moment they act like you mean nothing. And now you sit there trying to solve a mystery that is draining your peace. Are they a narcissist or are they just avoidant? That question matters more than people realize. Because if you misunderstand the difference, you may either abandon someone who genuinely fears intimacy or stay attached to someone who is slowly destroying your soul. And wisdom begins when you stop looking only at behavior and start looking at motives. Because two people can do the exact same thing for completely different reasons. One person avoids closeness because they are terrified of vulnerability. The other avoids closeness because they only care about control. That is the difference. An avoidant person often learned somewhere in life that emotions were dangerous. Maybe they grew up in a home where love was inconsistent. Maybe expressing feelings led to rejection. Maybe they survived by shutting down emotionally. So now, when intimacy grows, fear grows with it. They pull away not because they hate you, but because closeness activates old wounds they never healed. But narcissism is different. A narcissist doesn't simply fear vulnerability. They fear losing power. Everything becomes about protecting their image, feeding their ego, maintaining control, and avoiding accountability at all costs. They do not merely distance themselves emotionally. They use emotional distance as a weapon. And if you are not spiritually aware, emotionally aware, and mentally grounded, you will confuse trauma with toxicity. Listen carefully. Avoidant people withdraw from connection. Narcissistic people manipulate connection. That distinction can save your future. An avoidant person may go silent because emotions overwhelm them. A narcissist may go silent because silence gives them power over your emotions. One is drowning internally, the other is controlling externally. And the dangerous part is this: both can look cold, both can seem distant, both can struggle with communication. But the fruit eventually reveals the root. Watch how. They respond when you are hurting. A narcissist often invalidates your pain. They make your feelings seem dramatic, annoying, weak, or inconvenient. Some even twist your pain and make you apologize for reacting to what they caused. You cry, and somehow the conversation becomes about them. You express hurt, and suddenly you are too sensitive. That is emotional manipulation. But avoidant individuals usually respond differently. They may freeze. They may shut down. They may struggle to comfort you properly. But many times, underneath that emotional paralysis, there is still guilt, still care, still humanity. They may not know how to love well, but they are not intentionally trying to destroy you. A narcissist drains your identity. An avoidant person struggles to connect to yours. And another thing, pay attention to accountability. This is where masks begin to fall. Narcissists protect their ego like a kingdom. Apologies feel like weakness to them. Responsibility threatens the false image they built, so they blame, deflect, gaslight, rewrite history, make excuses. Everything becomes everyone else's fault. But avoidant people are different. Yes, they may avoid hardcore versatians. Yes, they may run from emotional intensity. But when they feel emotionally safe enough, many can reflect, grow, and admit wrongdoing. Growth is possible where humility exists. And you must stop trying to heal people who refuse to see themselves honestly. Because love without wisdom becomes self-destruction. Some of you are trying to understand someone while losing yourself in the process. You are overanalyzing texts, overthinking silence, making excuses for disrespect, calling emotional abuse miscommunication. Never confuse chaos with love. Real love may be imperfect, but it does not constantly leave you emotionally starving. And here is the deeper truth most people avoid hearing. Sometimes your desire to be chosen becomes stronger than your desire to be healthy. So you stay, you tolerate inconsistency, you accept emotional crumbs. You ignore red flags because loneliness feels heavier than confusion. But your spirit already knows when something is wrong. Peace disappears. Confidence fades. Your nervous system becomes exhausted. You start shrinking just to keep the connection alive. That is not alignment. That is survival. Healthy relationships do not require you to abandon yourself to keep another person comfortable. Read that again in your soul. A healthy connection should not force you to beg for clarity, affection, respect, honesty, or emotional safety. And this is why discernment matters. Not everybody who struggles emotionally is evil. Some people are wounded. Some people are disconnected from themselves. Some people genuinely need healing. But wounds are not an excuse to wound others endlessly. Pain explains behavior. It does not justify destruction. And you are not called to become someone's emotional punching bag in the name of compassion. Wisdom knows the difference between supporting growth and enabling dysfunction. Some people need patience. Others need boundaries. Some need understanding. Others need distance. And your life changes when you stop asking, how do I make them stay? And start asking, what is this relationship costing my peace? Because your peace is sacred. Your heart is sacred. Your emotional well-being is sacred. And the right people will not make you feel like love is a battlefield you must survive every single day. The right people communicate. The right people care about you, your feelings. The right people do not punish you for having needs. The right people bring clarity instead of confusion. And if someone constantly leaves you emotionally broken while demanding endless understanding from you, you must have the courage to step back and see reality clearly, not through attachment, not through fantasy, not through potential, but through truth. Because healing begins the moment you stop romanticizing what hurts you. You deserve relationships where honesty exists, where accountability exists, where emotional safety exists, where love does not feel like emotional warfare. And the moment you truly believe that, you stop chasing people who only know how to love halfway. You stop abandoning yourself trying to earn what should be given freely. And you finally realize the greatest form of self-respect is walking away from what continuously damages your spirit. A narcissist and an avoidant person can sometimes look similar on the surface, but the deeper motivation behind their behavior is completely different. One seeks control while the other seeks distance. If you do not understand that difference, you may spend years confused, emotionally exhausted, and questioning your own value. Narcissist often wants emotional power in the relationship. They want to feel admired, important, desired, and in control of how the connection operates. When they pull away emotionally, it is often strategic. Silence becomes a weapon. Affection becomes conditional. Attention is given and removed depending on how much control they feel they have over you. Their behavior creates emotional highs and lows that keep you chasing validation. Many narcissistic individuals are deeply focused on protecting their ego, so they manipulate situations to remain in the superior position emotionally. They may ignore your feelings, dismiss your concerns, or make you feel guilty for simply expressing your needs. The relationship slowly becomes centered around them, their emotions, their comfort, and their image. An avoidant person is different. Their distance usually comes from fear, not dominance. Emotional closeness can feel overwhelming to them because vulnerability triggers discomfort they may not fully understand themselves. Many avoidant individuals learned early in life that emotions were unsafe, unreliable, or disappointing. Instead of controlling others, they often try to control their own exposure to emotional intensity. When relationships become deeper, they may withdraw, become quiet, or need space because intimacy activates unresolved fears inside them. It is not always about manipulating another person. Many times it is about self-protection. This distinction matters because both behaviors can hurt you, but the emotional energy behind them is not the same. A narcissist often pulls away to make you chase them. An avoidant person pulls away because closeness itself creates anxiety within them. One is focused on maintaining power over others. The other is focused on escaping emotional pressure. You can also see the difference in how they respond over time. Narcissists rarely reflect on how their actions affect people unless it benefits them personally. Avoidant people may struggle emotionally, but many still experience guilt, regret, and internal conflict after distancing themselves. They may not express emotions well, but they are not always trying to intentionally damage someone else. Understanding this difference helps protect your peace. It teaches you not to label every emotionally distant person as toxic while also help. You recognize when someone's behavior is rooted in manipulation rather than fear. Two people can behave in almost identical ways and still have completely different intentions behind their actions. That is why intent matters more than behavior when trying to understand whether someone is narcissistic or avoidant. Looking only at surface actions can easily lead to confusion. You have to pay attention to the emotional purpose behind what they do. Both narcissists and avoidant individuals may ignore messages, become emotionally distant, cancel plans, or disappear when things become intense. Both may struggle with emotional intimacy and consistency, but the deeper reason for those actions reveals the truth. A narcissist often uses emotional distance as a form of control. Their silence is not always about needing space, it can be about creating insecurity inside you. They understand that inconsistency keeps people emotionally attached because uncertainty creates obsession. They may give affection one moment and withdraw at the next, causing you to work harder for their approval. This creates an unhealthy emotional cycle where you begin seeking validation from the very person causing your pain. In many cases, the narcissist enjoys being emotionally chased because it feeds their ego and sense of importance. An avoidant person usually behaves differently internally. Their withdrawal often comes from fear rather than manipulation. Emotional closeness may trigger anxiety, pressure, or vulnerability they do not know how to handle. Instead of controlling others intentionally, they try to escape emotions that overwhelm them. When conflict appears or intimacy deepens, their instinct may be to shut down, create distance, or avoid communication. Not because they enjoy hurting people, but because emotional intensity feels unsafe to them. This is why intent changes everything. A narcissist often distances themselves to maintain emotional power. An avoidant person distances themselves to protect themselves from emotional discomfort. One seeks dominance, the other seeks relief. You can often notice the difference in their emotional awareness. Narcissists frequently lack genuine empathy for the pain they create. Even when confronted, they may blame you, minimize your feelings, or turn the situation around to make themselves the victim. Avoidant individuals may still struggle to communicate properly, but many feel guilty after withdrawing. They often recognize internally that their behavior hurts people, even if they do not know how to change it immediately. Understanding intent helps you stop confusing emotional unavailability with emotional abuse. Not every distant person is manipulative, but not every wounded person is healthy for you either. Wisdom comes from learning to observe patterns carefully instead of reacting only to temporary emotions. When you understand motives, you protect yourself from becoming trapped in relationships built on confusion, emotional dependency, and endless self-doubt. One of the clearest ways to tell whether someone is narcissistic or avoidant is to pay attention to how they respond when you are hurting emotionally. Pain reveals character. Anyone can appear loving when things are easy, calm, and beneficial to them. But when your emotions require patience, empathy, and emotional maturity, the truth about a person slowly begins to surface. A narcissist often struggles to genuinely hold space for another person's pain because their focus usually returns back to themselves. When you express hurt, disappointment, or emo, emotional needs, they may react with irritation, defensiveness, or dismissal. Instead of trying to understand your feelings, they may minimize them. They might tell you that you are too emotional, too sensitive, or overreacting. Sometimes they completely avoid accountability by making themselves the victim in every situation. You may enter the conversation hoping for understanding, yet somehow leave apologizing for being hurt in the first place. This creates emotional confusion over time. Your feelings slowly become invalidated so often that you begin doubting your own reality. A narcissistic person may even weaponize your vulnerability later during arguments, using your insecurities against you to maintain control or superiority. Your pain becomes inconvenient to them because empathy threatens the image they want to protect. Instead of comforting you, they often focus on escaping blame. Avoidant individuals respond differently, even though they may also seem emotionally distant. When avoidant people witness strong emotions, they often feel overwhelmed internally. Many were never taught how to process vulnerability in healthy ways. As a result, they may shut down, freeze emoji, become quiet, or pull away temporarily. Their response can still feel painful because you may feel emotionally abandoned in moments when you need support the most. However, the difference is that many avoidant individuals still care deeply beneath their emotional walls. They may not know how to express comfort properly, but guilt often exists within them after conflict or emotional withdrawal. Unlike narcissists, they are not usually trying to intentionally make you feel weak, invisible, or emotionally unstable. Their emotional distance often comes from fear and emotional limitation rather than a desire to control or dominate. Over time, patterns become clearer. Narcissists repeatedly make your emotions feel like burdens or attacks against them. Avoidants may struggle emotionally, but they are often capable of reflection, remorse, and gradual growth if they are willing to heal. Watching how someone handles your pain tells you whether they are emotionally unsafe or emotionally unequipped. And that difference matters deeply when deciding who deserves continued access to your heart. One of the most confusing experiences in relationships is dealing with inconsistency. Some people can make you feel deeply loved one moment and emotionally abandoned the next. They become warm, attentive, and affectionate, then suddenly distant, cold, or unavailable. This emotional instability creates confusion, anxiety, and attachment because the human heart naturally tries to understand unpredictable behavior. But the reason behind inconsistency matters, especially when trying to distinguish between narcissistic patterns and avoidant patterns. A narcissist often creates emotional highs and lows intentionally or unconsciously as a way to maintain control. Their inconsistency keeps you emotionally focused on them. When they give attention, affection, or validation, it feels powerful because it arrives after periods of emotional deprivation. This cycle can make you emotionally addicted to temporary moments of connection. Narcissists often enjoy being pursued because it reinforces their importance and feeds their ego. Their hot and cold behavior creates instability that keeps the relationship centered around their needs, moods, and desires. Many times, the confusion itself becomes part of the control. You begin overthinking messages, analyzing tone changes, and constantly trying to earn emotional consistency from them. They may suddenly withdraw affection after intimacy, disappear after meaningful moments, or become distant when you express emotional needs. Then, once they feel you pulling away or losing interest, they return with charm, attention, or affection to pull you back in again. This cycle can continue for years if you do not recognize the pattern. Avoidant people can also appear inconsistent, but their behavior usually comes from fear rather than emotional games. Emotional closeness often creates internal anxiety for them. The deeper the connection becomes, the more vulnerable they feel, and vulnerability may trigger unresolved fears of rejection, disappointment, or losing independence. Because of this, they may unintentionally pull away after moments of closeness, not to manipulate you, but to regain emotional safety within themselves. Their inconsistency is usually connected to emotional overwhelm rather than a desire for power. They may genuinely enjoy being close to you while simultaneously feeling terrified by the emotional exposure intimacy creates. This internal conflict often causes them to send mixed signals without fully understanding why they are doing it themselves. The difference becomes clearer when you observe patterns over time. Narcissistic inconsistency often leaves you feeling controlled, drained, and emotionally unstable. Avoidant inconsistency often leaves you feeling disconnected but not necessarily intentionally harmed. Neither experience feels easy, but understanding the emotional source behind the behavior helps you respond with wisdom instead of becoming trapped in confusion. Consistency is one of the clearest signs of emotional maturity, and relationships without it eventually exhaust the soul. Accountability is one of the strongest indicators of emotional maturity, and it often becomes the clearest line separating narcissistic behavior from avoidant behavior. Everyone makes mistakes in relationships. Everyone says the wrong thing sometimes, shuts down emotionally, or handles conflict poorly. But what truly reveals a person's character is what happens after the damage is done. Do they reflect honestly, take responsibility, and attempt to grow? Or do they constantly protect themselves while leaving others emotionally wounded? Narcissistic individuals often struggle deeply with accountability. And why? Because admitting fault threatens the image they have created about themselves. Their ego depends on appearing superior, right, admired, or emotionally untouchable. When confronted about harmful behavior, many narcissists immediately become defensive. Instead of listening to your pain, they may blame you for reacting to it. They twist conversations, deny events, minimize your feelings, or completely avoid responsibility. Sometimes they even rewrite history to protect themselves from guilt. This creates emotional exhaustion for the other person. You begin entering conversations hoping for understanding, but leave feeling confused, guilty, or emotionally drained. Over time, you may start questioning your own memory and emotional reality, because narcissistic people often redirect accountability away from themselves so consistently that the truth becomes distorted. Their focus is usually on protecting pride, not repairing emotional damage. Avoidant individuals can also struggle with difficult conversations, but the reason is usually different. Accountability feels emotionally uncomfortable because conflict itself feels overwhelming. Many avoidant people fear vulnerability, emotional exposure, or disappointing others, so they may initially shut down, avoid discussions, or delay addressing problems. However, unlike narcissists, avoidant individuals are often capable of self-reflection once emotional pressure decreases. They may need time and emotional safety before opening up honestly. This does not mean avoidant behavior is harmless. Emotional avoidance can still hurt relationships deeply. But there is an important difference between someone who avoids because they are emotionally overwhelmed and someone who avoids because they refuse to see themselves truthfully. Many avoidant people feel genuine guilt after conflict and may sincerely want to improve, even if change comes slowly. The ability to admit fault is a sign of humility, emotional awareness, and inner security. Healthy people understand that being wrong does not destroy their worth. Narcissistic individuals often view accountability as weakness, while emotionally healthier individuals eventually see accountability as growth. You can learn a great deal about someone by watching what happens after mistakes occur. A person who constantly blames others will repeat harmful patterns endlessly. A person with ill to reflect, apologize sincerely, and work toward change shows the possibility of emotional growth. Relationships cannot survive without accountability because love without responsibility eventually turns into emotional chaos. Healing looks very different for avoidant individuals and narcissistic individuals because the root of their behavior is not the same. Many people make the mistake of believing that every emotionally difficult person simply needs more love, more patience, or more understanding. But growth only becomes possible when a person is willing to face themselves honestly. Without self-awareness, healing cannot truly begin. Avoidant individuals often struggle with intimacy because emotional closeness activates fear inside them. Their behavior is usually connected to unresolved emotional wounds, fear of vulnerability, fear of dependence, or past experiences that taught them emotional connection was unsafe. Because of this, many avoidant people actually want love deeply, but they become overwhelmed when relationships require emotional openness and consistency. The good news is that avoidant patterns can improve significantly when someone is willing to do the inner work. Healing for avoidant people often requires emotional safety, patience, honest communication, and gradual trust building. As they learn that vulnerability does not automatically lead to rejection or loss of freedom, they can slowly become more emotionally available. Therapy, self-awareness, and emotionally healthy relationships can help them recognize their triggers and develop healthier ways of responding to intimacy. Growth may not happen quickly, but many avoidant individuals are capable of reflection, empathy, and meaningful change because deep down they usually recognize their emotional struggles. Narcissistic individuals are different because the core issue is not simply fear of intimacy. The deeper issue is often a powerful need to protect the ego at all costs. Many narcissists avoid accountability because admitting flaws threatens the identity they have built around superiority, control, or self-importance. This makes change extremely difficult because healing requires humility, and humility requires the willingness to admit personal responsibility. A narcissist may apologize temporarily or promise change when they fear losing control of the relationship, but lasting transformation is rare unless genuine self-awareness develops. Many continue harmful patterns because they do not truly believe they are the problem. Instead of reflecting inwardly, they focus outwardly by blaming others, defending their image, or manipulating situations to avoid shame. This is why it is dangerous to confuse potential with reality. You cannot heal someone who refuses to confront themselves honestly. Love alone cannot force transformation in a person committed to avoiding responsibility. Understanding the difference protects your emotional well-being. Avoidant individuals may need support while actively working toward growth. Narcissistic individuals often require strong boundaries because their resistance to accountability can repeatedly damage those around them. Healing becomes possible only where honesty, humility, and self-awareness exist. Without those qualities, unhealthy patterns continue no matter how much love another person gives. In the end, the greatest lesson is not just learning whether someone is narcissistic or avoidant, it is learning to protect your own peace while seeing people clearly. Some people are wounded and afraid of intimacy, while others are driven by control and ego. Wisdom comes when you stop making excuses for behavior that continuously damages your spirit. Love should never require you to lose yourself just to keep someone else comfortable. The right relationships will bring clarity, emotional safety, honesty, and growth into your life, not constant confusion and emotional exhaustion. Trust your discernment, honor your worth, and never forget that protecting your heart is not selfish, it is necessary for your healing and your future. Thank you all for listening, for reflecting deeply, and for allowing these words to reach your heart. May you walk away stronger, wiser, and more aware of the relationships you allow into your life. Keep growing, keep healing, and never settle for anything that steals your peace. Stay blessed, stay focused, and keep choosing the path that honors your value.